All right, we have Natalie back on. I love doing these with you. They get such a good response. You have so much information. People love all of your analogies and all of your, this is why I had you on in the first place, because you just have so much good knowledge. So today we're going to be talking about extended breastfeeding and extended past a year, I guess. I don't really know what that definition looks like. For people that haven't heard you on this podcast before, let's just start with, how do you know what you know? How'd you get into it? And then your personal journey of 100 years of breastfeeding. Go.
I feel that way. So my name is Natalie. I would say my true passion for helping moms and babies started probably when I was in high school. My mom actually worked as a NICU nurse, and she moved into an education role where she ended up helping hospitals become baby friendly, which is a certification you can get worldwide. And when she was doing that, the big emphasis was on helping hospitals get their staff trained in how to support the breastfeeding unit, the mother baby unit at the beginning of the hospital stay. Because as you all know, years and years ago, you have a baby, they wrap them up like a burrito, they put them in the nursery, they line them all up in front of the window, your friends and family come and look through, and they all had a pacifier in their mouth, bottle in their crib, wrapped up. And that we are moving away from that. We're moving back to babies stay with their moms, and they do skin to skin, and they promote breastfeeding.
I can't even imagine that.
Right?
Yes. Someone taking my baby and just I mean, there's NICU stays where you have to, but just normal, healthy babies to just
healthy newborn baby. I remember as a very small child going to visit my mom who worked in the hospital, and that was my favorite place to walk by because all the babies would be lined up, and I would go and look through the window and see all the babies. So we've made this shift, literally in the last 20 to 30 years. And some hospitals are shifting much faster than others, but part of this shift is really educating the staff in how to promote a breastfeeding relationship at the very, very beginning from birth. And so anyways, that was my mom, moved forward with really helping a lot of the hospitals in Southern California, and then all of California, and now multiple other states become baby friendly. So during that time in my life, I was kind of dragged along, so to say, I willingly, I guess. I got to go along to all these conferences and listen to amazing people talk about breastfeeding and help her. And so then I went to college, and I actually worked for the State Department of WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children State Department, in their breastfeeding promotion unit. So I wasn't working with moms, but I was working on promotional materials as their student assistant. And I just thought this stuff is amazing. And I got to attend all these conferences and all sorts of dorm room walls had pictures of breastfeeding women. It was just, I thought this was so funny. But I knew at that point in time, I for sure want to help moms with breastfeeding. But I was playing volleyball in college. Nursing school was not an option at that point in time because of the conflict with scheduling volleyball and nursing school. So I finished my degree in child development. And in my degree in child development, I learned a lot about just secure attachment and all sorts of things, right, that you learn about with a child's brain that's developing under the age of 5. And so much of it tied to this initial secure attachment. And the more I learned about breastfeeding, the more I realized if we can help women have a good birth and breastfeeding experience, that secure attachment is not going to be a problem. That naturally happens. Yeah. And all the things that I've been passionate about were kind of coming together. So after volleyball, after college, I went back to school and became a nurse. And I worked in labor and delivery for about three and a half years. During that time, had my own baby, my daughter. At that point in time, I have 3 kiddos now. I'm pregnant with our 4th.
Any day. You're about to have
any day. Yeah. I'm literally due in 9 days.
We're term. We are full term. Yeah.
We're full term. We have a big baby waiting to come. So yeah, if I have to leave because I'm, contracting, you'll know. Sure,
no problem. Yeah.
So yeah, had my daughter, and I actually, when looking at my birth options, I decided that even though I was a labor and delivery nurse, I wanted to have my baby at home, a home birth with the midwife. And that really shifted some of my perspective, is learning more about home birth, learning more about more natural ways of doing things. And it opened my eyes to this whole world of people who were breastfeeding for longer, who were very passionate, I was, about the mother baby unit, co-sleeping with their babies, attachment parenting, this whole world that wasn't really what was promoted in school or in the hospital setting, but a little bit more of crunchy granola, experience, right? That I didn't know that I would want, but here I was loving it. And so then I had my second, another home birth, wonderful experience. And by then I was nursing my first, who was 2. I was nursing my newborn, who was a baby. And my husband looked at me and he said, there is no way you're going back to your 12-hour night shifts. Like, you're not leaving me here with 2 nursing babies. Like, not going to happen. Because I was 3, it's like 1 on each boob, like that's, and so I moved then into getting my IBCLC, which is an international board certification, international board certified lactation consultant, which basically means I spent a year in a course where I learned about breastfeeding. And there's so much to learn. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then I had to help moms for, it was like 1,000 hours. I had to document counseling and helping moms and teaching in order to sit for my board exam. So that took me a couple of years to get all these hours.
I want to pause you. So you said this in the last podcast. What you have is how many hours, a full year of learning about breastfeeding. And your typical pediatrician has
3 hours.
Right. That's madness. What about a lactation consultant? Is there a difference between what you have and just a
So there is a lactation educator, which is, I would say, like the lactation consultant, the IBCLC that I hold is kind of the top lactation certification. It means I can practice helping women with lactation anywhere in the world. And that certification I have to renew every 5 years. I have to retest for it every 10 years. I'm actually up for renewal very soon, and I'm working on all my CEUs and all the things.
Oh my gosh.
So that is kind of the highest level of lactation certification. Then you can get a lactation educator, which is basically, usually that course is a couple weeks long, and you with a lactation counselor or educator, you can run support groups and you can teach classes. But individual consulting with more like high risk issues is not like in your scope of practice. So it's usually the first thing that you would do. And then as you're helping and like learning more and everything, you could go on to get the next level. But when we look at pediatricians and OBs, who are the 2 people that most women go to when they have breastfeeding questions, they talk to their OB because they're still seeing them in those first 6 weeks postpartum, or they talk to their pediatrician. Neither of them, unless they have gone through a lactation consultant program, have any, a couple hours if they paid attention in school. Like, that is it. And it blows my mind because we know that children who get breast milk, that is like literally the #1 preventative healthy thing we could do for a child is make sure that they're breastfed. And that education is not something that is, it's not well known in the medical community for physicians, pediatricians or OBs. So it's really hard. That's one of the probably the most frustrating things for the work that I do now is that I often have conversations with moms where they're like, well, my pediatrician said, and I just cringe like, oh gosh, what did they say?
Yeah.
Like I've had, moms who had mastitis, for example, we talked about this last time, like a breast infection, they go into the ER and the ER doctor who knows nothing about breastfeeding tells them they have to stop breastfeeding and they should probably like dump their milk because it's not good for their baby. And that's literally the opposite. Like you breastfeed more and it's like, oh gosh.
Yeah. So, and this is what we said last time, is looking for a lactation consultant or going to the IBCLC website and then finding somebody that you can talk to there.
Yeah. So there's a difference in knowledge level, and we don't talk about it much, but there is a difference in that knowledge base.
Well, it's just a specialization, I feel like.
It is. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, if you took your baby to the pediatrician and they were having a cardiac issue, they would refer you to a cardiologist.
Right. Because they know a little bit about cardiology.
They know about cardiology,
Right.
So that's really the way that we see our role fitting, is like, if you were to take your baby to the pediatrician, you're having problems breastfeeding or with weight gain, they should refer you to the lactation consultant. Whose specialty is that,
Totally.
And some of our offices, we have one down here that's working on having a lactation consultant on staff at the pediatrician's office. So when you have your visit with the pediatrician, you actually have a visit with the lactation consultant. How do you do that? Brilliant. These are the types of things. And the good thing to know too, for any of you mommies who are pregnant or have new babies, in most insurance now will cover lactation consultant visits up to like 4 or 8, depending on your insurance. And so we have a few private consultants in our area that literally bill insurance. So you're not even having to pay for it.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's amazing. And like, it's worth looking into and not just making the assumption that like, oh, I'm just gonna have to suffer through this. Like you might actually have your insurance cover lactation.
Okay. So you went through all the schooling and then you had your 2 babies, your tandem feeding. Tell me more.
So then I started working, teaching. So I started teaching was much easier commitment than a 12-hour shift on the floor. So I started teaching childbirth classes, breastfeeding classes, newborn classes.
Which you're perfect for.
I loved it.
I'm sure.
I loved it. I miss it so much.
Yeah.
And during that time, I also started running a breastfeeding support group because our hospital did not have a consistent breastfeeding support group. So I talked to my boss, said, if I took this on, like, would you let me do it? And she said, as long as you have 3 women come, then I will let you do it. I'm like, okay. So of course I'm texting my mommy friends, like, I need you to come and sign into my support group.
Please, please, please.
Please come, please come.
Yeah.
And I ran that group for years and it grew to 30 to 40 women that would show up. Like we totally outgrew our space. We had amazing events. It just grew and exploded and was wonderful. And so during that time, then I had my third, who's 3.5 now. And then we had some just shifting happen at our hospital, things that I really wanted to do, they didn't want me to do. Anyways, long story short, I decided I am going to just do my own thing. I'm going to break off from the hospital. I'm going to start doing my own thing because I started homeschooling my kiddos and felt like I just needed more flexibility in my schedule. Yeah. I started working for another health and wellness company that was providing me the income I needed. So I didn't really need like that steady income. So it just worked. It was like, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing and I can do it all volunteer and I don't have to charge anyone. And like, I'm getting my income from somewhere else. I'm just going to do what I love when I have, you know, in the nooks and crannies of my time and my day, like around my. So I started doing that with my best friend who's a lactation educator. So she has the education certification and her and I started running support groups out of my home here in Redlands. And then of course, COVID and all of that. So we are getting back to, as soon as this baby is born, we're going to get back to in-person meetings. And my dream and goal is to then do all the things I was doing at the hospital here. So teaching childbirth classes, breastfeeding classes, newborn, all of that stuff. But now here I am, my daughter's 9.5. And I, for the last 9.5 years, have been nursing either 1 or 2 children. I could probably count on 2 hands the number of days I haven't breastfed just because I was like on a work trip or something for 2 or 3 days away from it.
Oh my God.
I've often thought like, I should sit down and like try to calculate like how many hours I think I've actually spent nursing in the last 9.5 years.
Whoa.
It's been a lot.
Yeah, no kidding.
And we're about to roll into some more. So that's where a lot of my education comes from, my true schooling background. But I would say the deeper part of my education comes from helping women for the last 7 years in support groups. Like walking with women through breastfeeding and then doing it myself, like having that experience. My best friend has 4 children and her oldest is 7.5. So she's been nursing 1 or 2 babies this whole time. So between her and I, we feel like we've seen a lot and we've helped a lot of moms and we have a lot of just personal stories and knowledge to share. So that's where I'm at now. That's where my passion is now. And I love the ability for me to share with all of you.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can tell that this is a passion of yours because you're like 1 million weeks pregnant. You're about to have a baby and you are on one. And I love it.
I'm so excited.
Super amped about it. And I'm like, yeah. Like, I know these things about you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. That's right. I know that. Like, so that's why it's so much fun. So to start, talk about, or just like reference quick where people can find you or your project.
My church house. So I'm on the basic social media, Instagram, Facebook. Natalie Johnson's my name, which is a super common name. So you may or may not be able to find me. No, on Instagram, my handle is standing so tall with like underscores. I'm 6'1", which is hard to tell on a video or a podcast, but that's why my thing is standing so tall. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I've tried to stand up for a lot of things I believe in. And so that was and we're going to talk about that today, like having confidence in nursing my children until they were 4, and like what that looks like, and standing up for that, like the decisions that I feel like I've made as a mom. So anyways, Stand So Tall is my Instagram. And then my maiden name is Melcher, Melcher. And that's a little bit of an easier way to find me on Facebook if you wanted to. And then my support group has a Facebook group, which I can add you into for, you find me on Facebook, and then an Instagram, which if you find my Instagram, it's linked right there below, but it's the Community Carriage House. And the quick reason is that I live in a 100-year-old home. My home was built in 1906, and out in the back, they have what we would now call like a garage, but back in the day, you called it a carriage house because it's where you would have put your horse and carriage.
Oh my gosh.
So it's this garage, but it doesn't it's not for a car, it's a smaller space. But anyways, that's where we've been running. We remodeled it and we are running our support group out of that space. And so my friend and I, knowing that we wanted to for sure branch out from just providing breastfeeding support, decided that when we named our group, we would call it the Community Carriage House, and that we would be able to offer all different things through our carriage house, whether it's education or dance. I mean, I also taught ballroom dance for about 8 years, and I teach country dance. So I also want to teach dance lessons back there. I'm a photographer. I want to do photography lessons back there. So there'll be a lot of things that the Community Carriage House will offer at its full capacity. Right now, breastfeeding support is what we're focusing on, but that's why it's not a breastfeeding specific name, because I wanted an avenue to share all the things I'm passionate about with the community. So
that's amazing. And then you do support groups on Zoom
on Tuesday. So right now we are doing Zoom support groups every Tuesday afternoon, 3:30 Pacific time, 3:30 to 4:30, sometimes a little bit later, depending on how many moms jump on. And our goal is to continue with the Zoom support groups for as long as we can, and add in the in-person one. So we've been doing the Zoom one just in COVID world. Right. Our in-person one will be on Wednesday morning. So if you happen to be in Southern California area and you want to come in person, you can come on Wednesdays.
I would love
that. But Tuesdays is where our Zoom one is. And we love having anyone join in, even pregnant. Like if you are listening to this pregnant, join in now. Like jump on the Zoom call and listen to women have a conversation about what their breastfeeding experience is like. Right now we have little ones. We had a 17-day-old baby, a 3-week-old baby.
Oh my
we've got little ones with moms who are like in it, like they're
and just to hear them have struggles and to be like, oh, that's okay. Oh, that's something that can happen. Oh, and she's still getting totally. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, and to sit like even on a Zoom situation, have a brand new mom say, oh, my nipples are so sore. And then have me be like, hey, can everyone who had sore nipples at the beginning please raise your hand? And like every person's hand goes up. And that mom's like, oh, okay. Like this just is part of it. Like I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not, I can still be nursing my 1-year-old like this other lady over here because she has sore nipples too. That is valuable. So I really love it when pregnant women jump on because they can see that and know it just prepares them so much.
Totally.
More.
I think that's huge. All right. So you kind of touched on this. You breastfeed your babies till 4. Tell me about why. Just tell me about why that number. Because some people say a year, some people say 2, and some people say their babies wean off. And if you've gone 4 with all of yours, like, tell me why and how and all the things.
Yes. Okay. Well, I would say when I first started breastfeeding, 4 years old was not on my radar. It wasn't like I was a high schooler, like I just feel like I'm nursing my kids till they're 4. That sounds good. Like it was not on my radar. But as I learned more and I was doing my IBCLC course, as I'm nursing I did my IBCLC course pregnant with my second. I literally found out I was pregnant the first week of our class. And then I delivered him like a week after we ended. It was 9 months. And I was pregnant the entire course. So I got pregnant with him. My daughter was like 17, 18 months old. And I was definitely not ready to wean her at that point in time. So I knew for sure I was going to be nursing her in my pregnancy. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as I'm in this class, I started learning just fascinating facts, right? I mean, like so many fascinating things, but here are a few fascinating facts. One, a child's immune system is not fully functioning until around 3.5 to 4.5 years old. So a child, when they're born, our 70 to 80% of our immune system is in our gut. It comes from gut bacteria that make IgA, which is our immunoglobulin ability to make an immune response. Okay, so it all like 78% of it is here. Now, babies are born without any bacteria in their bowels. They're sterile. So when a baby is born, they're planting, I like to think of it like a garden. So it's like a garden that should be full of microbiome. That microbiome is going to give you your immune system. It's going to give you your serotonin. It's going to give you all your ability to absorb nutrients and you get your toxins out, like all the things, right? But babies are born without any of that. So when they come through the vagina of their mother, it's literally their initial implantation of microbiome from the mom. So this is why we see a lot of interesting things that correlate. Like if a family has a family history of something, a lot of times if it's microbiome related, it's because it's passed at birth from the mom's microbiome to the babies. And then the baby has that same challenge. Yeah. Fascinating, right? So when a baby is born, they don't make their own IgA. They don't have any garden in there yet. It's like a blank garden. And they get this initial microbiome implantation. Another fun fact, this is so important. We're learning how important the microbiome is when the baby comes through the vagina, that a baby that's born via cesarean in very progressive places, I will not say this is happening everywhere yet, but it will be. They are putting gauze in the mom's vagina. And when the baby's born via cesarean, taking the gauze and wiping the baby because the baby didn't get the same implantation if they come out of a surgical opening than they do if they come like out the way.
Whoa.
Right?
Yes. So we're on mind melting number 1 and I'm just okay. Yeah. Keep going. This is incredible.
So anyway, this is all like way down the rabbit hole, but I think it's fascinating because so breast milk itself literally has a huge component of what we call a prebiotic, and prebiotic is like fertilizer for your garden. It's food for the bacteria in your body. So a baby who's trying to plant a garden for its first time is getting a mass amount of prebiotic from mama's milk. Now you'll notice in the last, well, no one would notice this. I noticed in the last few years, formula companies have started to advertise that now with prebiotics because they're trying their darndest to get a formula that's going to be close to mother's milk. And so prebiotics are one of the things that they've started adding in because it's such a huge component for gut health. Anyways. Yeah. So it takes about 6 months for a baby to actually have enough microbiome to create IgA immune response. So for the first 6 months, that's why we're very passionate about helping women just breastfeed for 6 months, because if your baby's exposed to anything else through a bottle or through formula or through food, they literally can't create their own immune response to it yet because they do not have IgA. So they rely solely on maternal immune, which is what a huge amount of breast milk is immunity. And so if our baby, let's say is 6 months old, they're crawling around and they lick the bottom of someone's shoe and they come and they nurse, my body absorbs their saliva, creates an immune response to what they were exposed to. That immune boosting, that immunity is in my milk in about an hour and a half. And I'm literally providing immunity for my baby.
What?
Amazing. Yes. So it's incredible. It's truly incredible. And we still don't know everything about breastfeeding. Like we're still learning things about this dynamic connection between a mom and a baby. But every time we discover new things, I'm like, this is just incredible. We were made to do this. Yeah. Clearly, how things were made to be. So with that being said, your child's immune system starts developing, but it's not completely developed until your child is older, closer to 4-ish years old. And so when I learned that my child would benefit from my breast milk and my strong, robust immune system providing them immunity until their immune system was strong enough to take over for themselves, I got determined, okay, if my kids want to nurse for longer, I'm going to nurse them. And another part of that for me was that I was working in a hospital. My husband is a nurse and he worked in the pediatric ICU. So he was with very sick children every day he was at work. So I had this mindset of like, if I can protect my kids from that, because like, I'm going to fall asleep next to my husband. I expose myself to him. I'm going to build an immune response to whatever he's exposed to. I could protect my kids from the things that he's exposed to by continuing to nurse them, even if that meant nursing them kind of a long time.
Right.
And people thought I was crazy. As soon as I would say it, like when people ask, like, you're still nursing your 3-year-old, I'm like, yeah, I am, because my husband works with very sick children and my kid's immune system's not fully developed yet. And I am the gap between that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I had learned that was fascinating was that a child only needs about an ounce of breast milk a day at like that age to fill that immune gap. So it's not like they need all the milk in the world. They just need a little bit. It's like an immunization every day from mom.
Oh my gosh, that's madness. So why do you think people like, where do you think this 1 year thing came from?
Well,
because most people say, I want to breastfeed for a year. And then they have like.
That's a cultural thing. It's a formula. It's we have in our and this is an America thing. Like you go to other countries and the norm is 2, is 3, is 4 years. Like they look at us crazy over here for weaning our babies so early. But we have a culture here that is still a formula feeding culture. And there's too much data to deny the benefit of breastfeeding for a small baby. Like formula companies work really hard to make you think that you're not going to make the perfect milk for your baby. But now you can get online and you can Google like information about breastfeeding. And there's so much information that says this is crucial. But we also know that like babies start to transition to food. They can transition to other sources of liquid by 1. Very typical for a baby to start taking in food by 1. So our dairy industry has pushed excessively that once your baby's 1, you don't have to breastfeed anymore. We got you covered. Your baby can have milk. And you don't have to do that. That's so hard. It takes so much time. Don't you want your body back? Your boobs are really for your husband. So when is he going to get them back? Like we had this whole cultural thing around how hard it is to breastfeed your baby and how we're going to save you from that. And, you know, if you make it to a year, well, good job, but man, that was hard. Aren't you glad we can now give your baby food and milk from a cow instead of a human and like call it good. And it's just a very, it's a very cultural thing that we have over sexualized breasts. We have not educated. I mean, like a lot of what you guys are going to hear today, you probably have never heard, but to me, this should be stuff we're teaching in sex ed in junior high. Like when we talk about reproduction, we should be talking about what breasts are for and what they can do and how amazing it is to breastfeed your kid.
And I feel like the culture also is just like, get back to work, it's
100%.
time a lot. And 100%. I think that a lot of like, I'm grateful that we have formula companies that are making things for women that can't breastfeed. But if you can, and you're just like, I don't know what this formula company is telling me that I can do the same thing. It's like, these are the benefits to continuing what you're doing. So I think that's,
yes,
it's crazy.
Really important. Well, and I think down here, especially like in Southern California, it's very hard to live off of 1 income. So that reality of like moms needing to go back to work is real. Like that is not well, you know, it's like, no, we have to, I need that income. And the reality is pumping is hard. Like being home with your baby and nursing is one thing, but pumping is hard. And so this is, none of this conversation is meant to like shame anyone who's chosen to do formula, or like, you know, who says 1 is my goal and I'm done. That is fine.
Great.
But we also want those moms who hit the 1 year mark, who are like, I don't think I'm done yet, to feel confident in continuing and to feel like there is reason to do so.
Absolutely.
And that they're not alone.
Well, and just to give the education on why, because even for me, I never made a goal, but I was like, I don't know, maybe a year. That seems like almost. And then I got to a year and I was like, literally no way. And I was just talking to my dad yesterday. He's like, did you just say nursing? Are you still nursing her? Isn't she like 2? I was like, first of all, she's 15 months. Second of all, yeah. And if you want to come over at nap time and bedtime and put her to sleep, you can do it. And we'll wean her. And he was just like, I'll think about it. I'm like, it's so easy. I literally can't imagine anything else. She sleeps well. I sleep well. Like let me know when you can come over for like a week and we'll wean her.
Well, and that, yes, I think that is the thing that happens with the vast majority of women who make it to one. They realize like,
nothing changes the next day.
Why would I stop? Like, this fixes all of the boo-boos. This is how we reconnect when I've been gone for 10 hours at my job. This is how I get my baby to sleep. My baby's still a baby. And you know, before I had a baby, I thought one was old, but one doesn't seem old anymore.
Yeah.
One is still very little.
Right.
And they're not even eating that much solids. Like, if I didn't nurse, how would they get their nutrients? Like, you start to, and then to me, that is where the huge value of, like, when I had women, the reason our support group grew so much is that these women would come with a tiny baby with a goal of 3 months, and they'd sit in a room with us who were nursing 3-year-olds, and they went, oh, I just didn't even know I could. All right.
Yeah.
And then here they are nursing and tandem nursing their babies and like doing things that they never thought that they would do, not because they didn't want to, but just because they had never seen it before.
Right.
They didn't know what the benefits would be. They didn't have the support.
Totally.
And once they had all of that, they're like, well, of course I'm going to keep breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think just being exposed to it. Cause I think even the first time you told me, oh yeah, I'm nursing my 4-year-old, I was like, what? And now I'm like, oh yeah, she nurses her 4-year-old, whatever. And like, I've got other friends that like tandem and their kid's almost 3 and they're still nursing. And I'm like, I remember Seth and I did a lactation consultant Zoom when I was pregnant, and Seth said something like, yeah, some kids still nurse till they're like 2.5. And then woman was like, I am. And I was like, Seth, and I like knew that, and I wanted to tell him quickly before he embarrassed himself, and it was terrifying. But like, that's what happens though, because you don't know until you're in it. And that's, yeah, just once you start getting the information and the knowledge, and if you still decide like, nope, one is it for me, great, cool. Right. But just like knowing, yeah.
Well, and I have very much the mentality of like, literally every drop of breast milk that goes into a baby is valuable. Yeah. So if you nurse for 1 week, fabulous. If you nurse for 1 month, like, I don't care. Like, we just want breast milk in babies. And if you choose to do that for longer, great. Like, we in our group, at least, we were very, very supportive of meeting moms where they're at and what they want without feeling any shame, any pressure.
Totally.
And if it's not working for both of you, it's not working. And we talk to moms about that a lot too. Like, if you are at a place where you're having nursing aversion, you aren't doing okay, maybe you're having too many hormone issues, maybe you need to get on a medication that's not compatible with breastfeeding, then the breastfeeding relationship needs to end. Like, we need children that have functioning mothers.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing. And breastfeeding can be part of that. But if it's not, then like, we still need a child with a functioning mom. Right. Like, that's not priority. So there's for sure a lot of gray, and there's a lot of, room to have very different goals. But this particular conversation, I really want for moms that feel like they might want to nurse for longer to just have confidence in their why. And like, know that they're not alone. Absolutely. And that they're not crazy.
Yeah. Well, the why is everything. Everything. If you know your why, you can explain it to someone else. You cannot give a shit if they care or not. You're like, oh, you still think it's weird? Okay. Like, I really don't care. And so I think just that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is just to empower the people that were kind of like, I don't know, she's getting older, but like, I don't feel like we should stop. There's no problem with it. Like, okay, cool. Keep going. We support you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so the immune system part's one of it. And that's part of what you asked, why till 4? That's like, that was part of it, was like, I know that my kid's immune system is not fully functioning. So I'm going to try to provide some amount of breast milk to my kids as they get older. And so with that being said, I want to explain that a breastfeeding relationship in the first 6 months looks different than it does from 6 months to 1 year, looks different than it does from 1 to 2, looks different than it does from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. Like, my 4-year-old is not coming up at the park like, Mom, I'm so thirsty, pull down your shirt and let me drink. Like, no, like, okay, we are breastfeeding, and if they wanted to, I always did, it didn't matter.
Right.
But that's not like what a lot of times moms think, that breastfeeding an older child is the same as breastfeeding an under 1-year-old, but just with a 4-year-old or with a 3-year-old. Yeah. And it's not. A child at that age is, I mean, and anyone who's had older kids knows, like, they are busy. They are, doing all sorts of fun stuff. They are eating full meals. They are drinking full beverages. Like they are completely able to get what they need from the food around them. And that really, for most women who are nursing older children, it is at bedtime, maybe at nap time, or when they first wake up in the morning. They're not nursing them through the night. They're not nursing them on a whim whenever their kid wants. And I know for a lot of moms, that becomes a challenge. Like my 2-year-old comes up and literally pulls my shirt down in the middle of public. I'm like, that makes me uncomfortable. Okay, great. You can create a boundary around that. Doesn't mean you have to stop breastfeeding altogether. Right. You can just say, this is when we breastfeed. We breastfeed when we wake up in the morning, we nurse before we go to nap time, and then we nurse before bed. And that's it. It's 3 times. Because remember, the benefit comes literally from having just one nursing session in a day. Like it doesn't have to be the main source of nutrients, and it's not going to be the main source of nutrients for an older child. At that point in time, that little nursing session is providing a few different things. It's providing emotional stability and connection. Like there's a lot that doesn't have anything to do with food, right? Like we help our children regulate. So when our kid is losing their marbles and we say, come sit and nurse, and we are calm and we give them a coping skill and they can calm themselves down, we're literally teaching them how to self-soothe and cope. And now a lot of people will tell you like, oh, for them to self-soothe, they have to do it on their own. Like, no, you show your child how to do all of those things. And in the breastfeeding relationship, a lot of that can happen. So when that happens still at 3, like emotional regulation is still being learned at 3 years old and older. But the other thing that you're providing in that little nursing session is this little boost of micronutrients and immunity. So the other thing that's really fascinating is that when you nurse your baby, your body absorbs their saliva. We've talked about this before. It takes inventory on what they've been exposed to, creates immune response. It also takes inventory on what their body is lacking. So if your baby child is dehydrated, if they need more protein, if they need some micronutrients, and then your body adjusts its milk to accommodate the gaps. So have you ever had a picky 2-year-old who only wants to eat a handful of things? I nursed my 2-year-olds because I knew even if they only ate a handful of things for the week because they were being picky, my body was literally filling in the nutritional gaps and compensating for whatever they were not getting from their table food. That's amazing. Like if you knew you could give your kid an ounce of milk every day,
specifically formulated for what they need,
specifically formulated for what they'd been exposed to and what their body was lacking. Like that is insane to me.
And what you've been exposed to as mom.
And what you've been exposed to, for sure. Yes.
That's what I think about sometimes when Aaliyah like doesn't eat well. I literally imagine a glass with like rocks in it. And then I'm like pouring milk in it and just filling all those gaps where she's like getting all the things that she needs. Yes. I don't know why that is in my head, but that's like what I think about. I'm like, ooh, I'm just filling all those little gaps that she needs to fill.
And your body is literally doing that based on her saliva. So like, for example, and I'm tempted to do this, although I never have, but I'm tempted to, because I've seen other women do it. When this baby is born, normally I just nurse my kids on both sides, because having a toddler nursing when your baby's born is like the best. You don't get engorged. Like they're the best, most efficient pump ever. Like they help bring the milk in easy. Like anyway, it's the best. So I've often just let my toddler nurse on both sides and my newborn nurse on both sides, and like it's been fine. But if I chose to, which I said I might just out of pure experimental desire, have my toddler only nurse on one breast and my newborn only nurse on one breast, my boobs would literally make different milk based on their saliva. Like the newborn breast would make newborn milk and the toddler breast would make toddler milk, and literally it would be catered to that child's saliva.
We have talked about this before, because I was thinking your toddler's out getting in the dirt, getting in all the things, and then coming back to you, then are they passing that immunity onto the baby? Because your boob's gonna, like, if you are cross feeding, you would think that your boob's like, oh, whoa, you licked the bottom of a shoe. Ew, here are the things. Oh, baby, you're also nursing? Cool, here are all the things.
So your newborn is a lot less likely to get sick with your toddler running around if you are nursing both of them. It's not me.
Dude, and when we talked about this, because I remember just having like, I call them like they're high ideas, but they're like breastfeeding time ideas where I'm doing nothing but thinking. And I'll be like, Seth, I had another breastfeeding idea. And he's like, what is it this time? And we were talking about this and you were like, yeah, think about the wet nurses for the royal family who went out into the village and like was with all of the not royal family and then came back to the royal family and gave those babies all that immunity. Like, what? That's incredible. It's just so cool.
Amazing. And that's another one of those, like, I mean, people think this is super weird, but another one of those benefits to milk sharing or like nursing other people's babies. Like I told you, my best friend and I, we live houses away from each other. We have babies at the same age. Our pregnancies were like 1 week apart. And so there have for sure been moments where I needed to go do something. And I'm like, here, keep the kids. And if he's hungry, nurse him, like she needs to go do something. Like, here's the kids. Like if she's hungry and they get old enough where they're like, you're not my mom, but when they're little, they'll usually just eat.
Yeah. Right.
And so, but in those moments, as crazy as that might sound, my son then got immunity from her, like her immune system and my immune system. Like that is huge. That is hugely beneficial to that child. So, that's okay.
No, and I've heard that tandem feeding. Okay. So we're skipping ahead a little bit. So I'm going to go through this, but like, so breastfeeding can prevent a period, which it did for me. And we talked about this and it was like, try night weaning, see if you can get your period back. Worked. Literally stopped night weaning or did the night weaning process. I have a whole YouTube video about that. But then 30 days later, I got my period. I was like, all right, well, here we go. But then when you get pregnant, I guess we're skipping ahead. I'm going to go to the tandem question just because it's fresh.
Okay.
I've heard that the tandem can help the baby and the toddler bond.
I would say very much yes. That has been my experience.
Yeah, because they're like sharing and like I've seen pictures of them holding hands and like the toddler is like, okay, I'm not sure about you, but like, hi. Yeah.
So I think a lot of what we have to remember so this was an analogy that was given to me when I was pregnant with my second, and it like blew my mind. So someone said to me, hey, like your daughters, because I'm talking to my daughter about she's gonna be a big sister, she's gonna be so excited, right? She's 2 or not even 2, right? Like she doesn't really understand what's going on. And in all honesty, like my husband and I had never transitioned from 1 to 2 children either. So like it's gonna be for everyone. But what someone told me is they said, I want you to imagine your husband came home one day with a new wife and he loved her and he kissed her and he hugged her and spent all of his time with her. And he wanted you to love her too and hug her and kiss her and cuddle with her. And he was going to give all of your old clothes to her because they didn't fit you anymore. And she was going to be top priority.
Oh my God.
Like, how would you feel? And I'm like, oh, I would lose my flipping marbles.
Yeah.
Right?
What?
I would lose it. And so this friend of mine's like, so you need to imagine as you come home with this new baby, that is the experience your toddler is going through. Is it used to be about them. And now you're going, come on, love your sister, hug your sister, hold your sister, kiss your sister. Oh, we had this baby for you. It's going to be great. And like all of our time, energy, and attention is spent on this new sweet baby.
Right.
And like, that is not going to be easy. And now, not saying that, like, I mean, children transition and siblings are amazing and all of the things, but having this perspective of if your 2-year-old flips a lid, give them some grace.
Yeah.
Like, you would too, if this happened.
That's such a good way to go about it with compassion, because that like analogy just makes your blood boil and you're like, oh, he just wants me to love her too? Oh, okay.
Really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's saying, honey, I brought her for you, a companion for you.
Right. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. So I think thinking of it like that, like having this excessive amount of compassion for the older child. Totally. When I was moving into that situation of welcoming this new baby, the thought of the best way I had connecting with my 2-year-old being gone and a new baby taking that place, like that was way overwhelming to me to think like, oh, so now I'm going to tell my daughter, this is the way we connect. This is the way we bond. This is what she's had for 2 years now, that you're out, honey. Someone else is in. And
this is our bedroom now. You get to sleep on the couch. Literally. Oh man. Okay.
So with that kind of mindset, I felt like all of our conversations were like, there's enough to share. Mommy has room on her lap for both of you. You are not being replaced.
Right.
Let's cuddle. Like, you know, we're going to share with your brother who's now here.
Yeah.
And like, look, and I got to, and for me, it was okay nursing both at the same time. Like I would sit her on my lap and I would sit him on my lap and I would nurse both of them. And she would look at him and she'd hold his hand and she'd touch his hair. And I could encourage all of that. Like, oh, you're such a good big sister. Look at you. And all of the like connection things like, oh, baby's getting tired. Do you want to nurse too? Let's all take a nap. Like there were all of these moments where I could facilitate
the connection.
Us now, not you're over here and it's us now.
Was it ever not magical where she would like hit him or something? Or like try and get him off or.
I'm sure well, I will say happened as he got bigger. So when he was like a newborn, you know, he was little, but I'm sure you went through this phase where the baby who's nursing also wants to like twiddle the other side, like wants their hand on the other nipple.
Oh, I hate that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh,
God.
I can't.
So,
I cannot.
When my son got to that phase, he would like go and like try to push her off because he was wanting to have his hand, and she would be like mad and then try to push it. So there was a little bit like, hey, stop. But then I would just have them hold each other's hands. Like, no, we're just gonna hold hands, or I'll hold your hands. Like I don't want you guys twiddling anyways, like let's just stop. And I didn't always nurse them together at the same time. I did, like I said, nurse them a lot together, tandem, like at the same time, but not always. Sometimes I just nursed her and sometimes I just nursed him. And my friend, when she's tandem nursed, that having both babies on was way too stimulating for her, so she never nursed them both at the same time. So her conversations with her girls, even now she's tandem nursing her 3-year-old and 1-year-old, is like taking turns. It's like, okay, I'm going to nurse Isla, and then I'm going to, you know, when you're done, then we're going to nurse Audrey, and we're going to take, and you can sit here and cuddle with me, but like we're going to take turns. And you know, so her conversation's been a little
boundaries.
bit more boundaries. And I think that's the other thing we have to remind ourselves is like this relationship, like having a conversation with your child about a physical relationship like breastfeeding and talking about boundaries is literally setting the stage for them to understand boundaries around bodies forever. So if my baby's doing something to me that I don't like, and I teach them, this is my body and you cannot do that. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. I'm setting up an expectation that you're going to say this about your own body, and you don't have to let people do things to your body that you don't want them to do. And if someone says that you can't touch them in a certain way, then that's okay. Like we can actually love you with all of my heart, but you're still not allowed to do that to my body. Yeah. And like, these are conversations that I know seem like weird to like be thinking about with a tiny child, but it's really setting up. Like if we force our children to hug and kiss every single person that they don't want to hug and kiss, what are we setting them up for as teenagers? So I feel like that is another part of this, an interesting dynamic as you nurse, especially an older child. My son right now is 3.5, and I've gotten to the point where I was nursing him at night without a problem, but now I'm too pregnant, I'm too uncomfortable, like I have to be like just perfectly positioned with my pillow. Yeah. So when he comes in, just this last week, I decided like, I can't nurse you at night anymore. This is too hard. My nipples hurt. You're big. I mean, he's like the size of a 5-year-old because we're tall people, and he's just big. And so I had a conversation with him during the day. I said, you know, Wes, mommy can't nurse you at night anymore. Like baby's getting too big. I'm too uncomfortable. I'm happy to nurse you during the day. When the sun's up, we'll nurse, but I can't nurse you at night. And he's like, okay, mom, and like comes and he climbs in bed and he lays with us. And then when the sun comes up, he's like, mommy, it's daytime. Can I nurse now? I'm like, yeah, sure, we can nurse. And like he's able to respect a boundary I need to put around my body. Yeah. Which I think is really valuable. Like
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that got like way too
I feel like all of that I was just soaking up. But before tandem and after breastfeeding, you can be pregnant and nursing, right? And so I know that you've said that sometimes people realize they're pregnant because their nipples are sensitive or things like that. Or I've read that, well, we read stimulate your nipples to make contractions happen to get the baby born. So like, how did those things play into breastfeeding while pregnant?
Right. Great question. So for every woman is really different depending on her body and when her period will come back. I know some women who were exclusively breastfeeding, their period came back at 6 weeks. And they're like, what the heck? And then there was women like me who I nursed. I had one period when my daughter was 17 months old and I got pregnant with our second. So I had like one cycle at 17 months. And then he was over 2 before I had another period. So I had he was 2 and 3 months maybe when I had another cycle. So it was always a funny question. When you go to the doctor, like, when was your last menstrual period? I'm like, well, I've had one in the last 4.5 years. I don't know. Whatever. Like, kind of crazy. So every woman's body is really different. A lot of it can be based on your hormones, literally like the fat content on your body, what your if you're on different kinds of meds, like there's all these different factors, right? Every woman's body is really different. What we know is that when a baby, so this is the way, and I'm Christian, so I feel like this is how God designed it, but whatever you believe, but this is how it works, is that when you have a baby and you are exclusively breastfeeding them, they will nurse a lot at night. Babies need to nurse a lot at night. The norm is that they would wake every 2 to 3 hours, even throughout the night, to nurse. When they are doing that, they keep your hormone level at a place where you are not likely to ovulate. So those moms who have a period at like 6 weeks are usually doing a pacifier, they've night weaned, they're doing bottles in some way. They're not actually exclusively breastfeeding through the nighttime hours, which is kind of the crucial part.
Okay.
So if you're exclusively breastfeeding through the nighttime hours, your hormones are going to stay at a place where you are going to breastfeed and not ovulate. Now, there's a couple of things happening here. One, your body is saying it is not time to have another baby. Like, you are still recovering. You are, and along with that, which I think is super important, and if your husband's not listening to this, pull him in for this comment right now, that also means your sex drive may be completely MIA, because your body is like, it is not time to make a baby. So I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I have zero sex drive. I don't even, like, I'm touched all day by this baby that when my husband comes home and he's like, hey, I'm like, don't touch me. Like, I can't have you needing my body too, because I have a baby who needs my body all day. And like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And in our culture, that's really frowned upon, right? Like, you know, how could you say that to your husband? And like, he's been patiently waiting and all that. But the reality is, for thousands of years prior to birth control, that was birth control. Like, women would have been like, no, I'm feeding a baby. I have no desire to have sex. I have, my vagina's dry. Like, I don't have moisture down there. Like, my body is not ready to make another human.
Right.
And since sex is procreation, I'm not ready to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, we have to have a lot of grace for that. Like, I will tell you, for the first probably 6 months of breastfeeding my small babies, my desire to make another baby is gone. Now, does that mean it's gone forever? No, we're pregnant with our 4th child. Really, it's fine.
Right.
But the reality is, our body naturally wants us to space our children. So not only are we going to be less likely to actually ovulate and be able to get pregnant at all, but we're also not going to want to. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have a great sex drive and desire that you should feel bad about that. Good for you. I'm happy. Go have sex. But like, if you're not feeling that, don't feel like there's something wrong with you. It's your body's desire to space your children for your health and for your child's health, because your child needs a lot of good breast milk before you roll into pregnancy, because your breast milk does change when you're pregnant. And so, whenever that period comes back, your body's now saying, okay. And like, once again, that usually correlates with some longer sleeping at night. So if your baby starts sleeping longer at night, your hormones have a chance to do a little shift, and your body's like, oh, okay, we don't have this baby that's as needy at night. Maybe we can be ready for another, and you will start ovulating potentially at that point in time.
And I remember you telling me that when you become pregnant, it's the hierarchy of needs. It's the baby gets all of the nutrients, all of the stuff primary, your breastfeeding baby, and then you. So you need to like, I remember you saying like, you're taking those vitamins for you because all of those vitamins are just getting like your breath. I don't even know. Does the vitamins go to the baby? I don't know.
Well, so yeah, you're exactly right. And like this, so a lot of people will say like, well, you can't breastfeed and be pregnant at the same time because the baby that's growing will really, really suffer, because the baby that's nursing is going to be taking all of your nutrients. And that's just simply not true. The body will cater to the baby that it's growing. And that baby is getting everything they need leached from your body, literally like a parasite, right?
Perfect.
And so we encourage moms to like eat well and to take vitamins and to drink water. It's not because that directly correlates with your baby's health. It's because you are going to suffer otherwise. Like your baby is taking what they need, and your job is to replenish your stores. So if you're, you need an extra 500 calories a day if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, you need an extra 500 calories a day if you're breastfeeding, and you need an extra 300 calories a day if you're pregnant. So if you're doing both, you better be getting in some extra calories.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's literally better than any workout program you could ever.
No kidding.
Burning mass number of calories in feeding these two beings. So when you get pregnant though, a lot of times women will notice like that initial nipple tenderness, and kind of like the first time, like a lot of women will notice that like my boobs are like a little bit swollen,
right,
my nipples are a little bit sore, and it's one of those initial indications for a lot of women. But you notice that a lot more dramatically when you have a baby sucking on your nipples.
right.
Hey, you're like,
I can imagine.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We for sure have had women coming to support group. Let's say they've got an almost 2-year-old, a 20-month-old or something, and they're like, I think something's wrong with my baby's latch because all of a sudden my nipples are sore again. And we're like, after 20 months, there's nothing wrong with your baby's latch. Like they didn't all of a sudden change.
Yeah.
One of a few things is happening. One, are you ovulating? And maybe it's their first ovulation, or maybe it's their very first period. Like, are you on your period? Like, yes, I just started yesterday. Well, here you are. It's a hormone thing. Or if you're not ovulating, you're on your period. Did you take a pregnancy test?
Oh.
Because it's you. It's not your baby at 20 months isn't like, I'm going to switch things up and all of a sudden make my mom sore. Like, no, they are doing their thing and they're doing the same thing. It's you at that point that is different. And so then we're looking at, what hormone shift happened in your body.
Correct.
So then we have this interesting transition in early pregnancy where your body will keep making what we would consider mature milk, like milk for your toddler for a bit. And then as the placenta starts to grow, the hormones change. And like that's when women start to get more sick. You have some of those other symptoms that come up in pregnancy. And during that transition, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, all the way to like 12, 14 weeks. During that time, your body transitions from making mature milk for your toddler to making colostrum, which your newborn will need. So even if you're not nursing a baby, you're making colostrum by around 12, 14
Oh my gosh.
weeks.
I remember that when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, Amber, my sister. I'm like, it's already happening. Look at my bra. Like I was a preteen just being like, what is this? Because I had it in my bra and I was just freaking out, and I Googled it and it's fine. But anyway, yeah.
Once again, something that we probably should talk about in sex ed. If we're really trying to help children not have sex with each other and get pregnant, we should talk about these things.
Yeah, right. No, your boobs will start leaking pretty early.
Yep.
Okay, so then how does your toddler respond to the colostrum?
So that's an interesting dynamic. So if you are pregnant with a very, very young toddler, there is a chance that transition to the more colostrum isn't going to be enough for them. And so we have had moms who will say like, I had to start supplementing with other mom's milk or with formula because my child who was 9 months old wasn't getting enough from me anymore because they weren't eating enough table food and my milk transitioned, which is why we really want you to wait and space them out, because if your 2-year-old is all of a sudden getting colostrum, that's not a problem. They're able to compensate with table food, and that's what they're getting is like high fat, high calorie, high immunity. Like it's like dessert. It's incredible. And it's very nutrient dense for them, but it's not volume dense. So there, and your body will keep, it's not like you have a certain amount of colostrum. Your body will keep making colostrum until the placenta is out of your body. So like upon delivery and the delivery of the placenta, the hormonal shift that happens after that is what allows your body to stop making colostrum and making mature milk again. Yeah. So your toddler, your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old. So my 3.5-year-old is getting colostrum. He's not getting mature milk. He sits and he nurses and he's moving some colostrum because I have a baby that I'm growing and a placenta that's still attached to me. And so it's a very interesting transition. Now, most toddlers love the taste of colostrum. It is sweet. It is thick. It is like dessert.
I've heard that. But I've heard the opposite. They might get this new taste and be like, what is this? Never mind.
Yes. And so that's a little bit of a personality thing. I think that's also dependent upon the mom's response, right? Like our kids are excessively sensitive to us and our emotional state. So if I'm like not sure I really want to nurse my 2-year-old and I'm not sure I really want to tandem nurse my babies and I like my nipples are really sore and every time my 2-year-old comes to nurse I'm like, ouch, oh this is so uncomfortable, like my 2-year-old might be like, never mind.
Actually, I'm good.
Experience is not what it used to be. I'm not interested. As opposed to a mama who's like, I know pregnant with my second, I was so tired my first trimester that the fact that I was still nursing my daughter was one of the only ways I got her to like slow down and take a nap with me. It was like, come on, let's nurse. And I kept thinking like, I wasn't nursing right now. I literally don't know how I would like get a nap because I'm exhausted and I can't get her to like slow down.
Yeah.
So, there's, and every woman's different and every family's different, but it's physically very possible. If you get pregnant while breastfeeding, you can continue to breastfeed while pregnant. Right. So let's talk about this myth.
So that's what I was going to say. Let's do the last question of the contractions, because that's kind of concerning.
Right. Well, and people will say like, you're going to miscarry if you're breastfeeding and you have your oxytocin and that causes you to contract and it will make you miscarry your baby. Right. And so let's talk about that because there's no data that shows that. And one of the best groups of people we can look at is the group of women that are associated with the La Leche League. So the La Leche League is this long-running group of breastfeeding women. And statistically, they have higher breastfeeding during pregnant and tandem feeding rates than anyone else like in our country. Like if you look at groups of women, their statistics are many, many, many more of those women are nursing a long time, nursing through pregnancy, and nursing 2 babies. Okay. As a group of women, they do not have higher rates of miscarriage, higher rates of preterm labor. They don't have any higher rates that we could associate with that behavior where we could say, oh, see, this group of women often is nursing during pregnancy and their miscarriage rate is exponentially higher. There's not any correlation. Is it the same? So do you know? Is it the same? I don't know if it's the same. I just know that it's not higher. I don't know. I guess what group of women you were comparing it to. Because there's, differences in ethnicity differences. But I mean, just that in itself, if it was like, oh, you're going to breastfeed, you're going to miscarry, then the people that were breastfeeding would have higher rates of miscarriage. Yeah. We would see it. We would see it represented very clearly in that particular group of women, which we don't. So the other thing to know is that if your body, once again, so oxytocin is what can cause you to have a contraction, right? But in order for that to happen, you actually have oxytocin receptors on your uterus that have to be available to receive oxytocin and open. Now, they are not for pregnancy. And that's why sometimes even doing, I'm sure there are people who have went in for an induction. I was put on Pitocin. Nothing happened. It didn't work. I didn't dilate. It didn't make me contract. Because if we're trying to flood our receptors with oxytocin and Pitocin to make us contract, but they're not available for flooding, it doesn't do anything. Right. Yeah. If there's nothing to receive, then it doesn't matter how many times you throw it. Yeah. Right. And so, I mean, for just one example, personally, my son was 10 days late. I was nursing a 2-year-old every day, trying to go into labor. Come over here. It didn't work. Oh my gosh. Because my body wasn't ready. Like my uterus wasn't ready. Yeah. So your body, when you're breastfeeding, starts to get very comfortable with this specific level of oxytocin. Now, FYI, oxytocin is released when you have an orgasm too. So we don't tell women stop having orgasms during pregnancy because you're going to go into labor. Right? That's not a conversation that we have. In fact, it's the opposite. You should have some sex so that your baby, well, no, but that's
to induce your baby. So that's kind of what we're saying, I guess.
So, but we don't say don't have sex all pregnancy, only do it once you're full term. People have sex all pregnancy.
Right.
You see,
hopefully having orgasms.
Hopefully having orgasms. But as you're getting to the end and as your receptors are open, that process of having sex and having an orgasm can actually make a difference. But it doesn't for the whole pregnancy, right? So when we are looking at this idea that like, if you're breastfeeding your baby, you're going to make yourself contract early in pregnancy, it's just not true, because if you are, the level of oxytocin your body is like used to will not make you contract, and your receptors on your uterus are not ready to.
Because baseline is what it is.
Baseline is what it is. Exactly. And now I will say the caveat to that is when women have gone through full IVF and their body didn't spontaneously get pregnant on its own, and we don't know how well their body will hold a baby. Like, okay, different story. Maybe we shouldn't do anything. If you have an incompetent cervix and you've had past pregnancies where your body just opens really quickly and you've needed it sewn shut, like with a cerclage, then let's not tempt fate. Let's not push that potentially could cause an issue. But for the normal healthy woman who's breastfeeding a baby who gets pregnant while breastfeeding, there's not any reason why she needs to stop breastfeeding, because her body did it. Her body said, I can have the baby being grown in here and not stop breastfeeding. Like this is compatible, or I wouldn't have done it. So go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just so grateful that you had this conversation with us, because that, even just that, I was like, oh yeah, the uterine contraction, and you're like, well, no. And like, I feel like all of the facts that you've come up with are literally, I'm just like, my mind is melting, and it's just so supportive and helpful to, you're the best.
I love this stuff.
I know, I love it.
Well, I just don't understand why it's not conversations that we typically have. Like,
literally,
it should be conversations that women have, like about childbirth.
And that's what somebody wrote on one of our past videos, is they're like, thank you so much for this free content. Like, thank you so much for this information that isn't anywhere else. And I'm like, or just not presented by Natalie, because she's the greatest. So yes, no, I agree. I think it's good information for people that are looking for support. And it's, I'm just so grateful that you are here and willing to share all of this with us, because it's just too good. All right. Well, honestly, until next time.
Yeah, I know. We run out of time again.
No,
so
we'll just do it again. We've got a whole year of information that you've learned that we can share. That's amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Natalie. And like I said, we will see you next